Hello everyone, my name is Neerav Kaku. I'm a longtime Delphi developer and an Embarcadero MVP. In today's session, we will learn how to call REST API from APILayer.com, and we'll do that using our own Delphi application. So, what is APILayer.com? API Layer is a useful set of APIs that expose real-world data for consumption within, say, a microservice application that you may have developed using Delphi. These APIs include geolocation, language detection, currency conversion, weather, and many more. Our focus today will be the stock exchange data. For that, we will use the Market Stack API. When you click the Market Stack link, you come to the website. You can go ahead and create your free account there. Since I've already created my account, I will simply go and click Dashboard because I'm already signed up. Now you can see my dashboard with my access key displayed. We will need this key to call our APIs. First, let's call the API that lists the exchanges of the world. And here's how we do it. Next, let's head over to Delphi, open the REST debugger, paste the API for the exchanges, use our access key with it, and call it. Perfect. It looks like our call went through. We've got the details of the exchanges in a JSON format. Detail has actually come in the data element of the response. Okay, so let's hit copy components so that we can paste them on our Delphi form. When you paste the components, you can see there are 3 components that have been pasted. The REST client, the REST request, and the REST response. The brilliant thing about the REST debugger is that these components are actually pre-configured with the settings already, which basically means that you can pretty much hit execute on these components right now and they will work. Okay, so now we need one more component called the REST request dataset adapter. Before we move ahead, let's just rename our components so that they make a little bit more sense. Let's drop FD mem table so that it can hold the data that has come from the JSON response. Using the dataset adapter component that we just put on our form, we have to configure the dataset adapter to read from the right element in the response component and set it to output it in the mem table component. If we now click execute, you'll notice that the mem table is automatically set to true. In fact, now we can actually add all the fields that have come from our JSON response, and we can now use a string grid to actually display the data by binding the mem table to the string grid visually. As expected, the binding components have been automatically created, and it's probably a good idea now to rename our string grid also. So then in the next step, we will add the fields from the mem table as columns in the string grid. Now, probably a good idea to reduce the size of the fields so that the user can see that easily. Because we've accomplished so much, let's go ahead and save our project before we lose the changes. When we run the project for the first time, you can see there's actually no data on the grid. That's because we haven't called the execute function when the form loads. So let's go ahead and put that execute function in so that we can get the data as soon as the form loads up. Now when we run the project, we get the data at the form load and the data is nicely displayed in the grid. Now let's go ahead and grab the API for the tickers, basically the individual stocks that are listed on the exchange. We'll go back to our REST debugger, change the API there to now get the tickers data for a particular exchange. And this is how you do it. Notice that the tickers information actually comes in a sub-element called tickers, which itself is an array within the main element called data. And we can now hit copy components once again to get this pre-configured API and drop it on our form. I'll just go ahead and rename these components also. And copy the REST response dataset adapter and the fdmem table component again, so that I can reconfigure them to work with the new REST components that I just pasted. Okay, so let's quickly change the response JSON component to the tickers component. And since the data is in the data.tickers element of the JSON response, let's quickly change that also. When we hit execute, everything works fine. However, the table that we copied has old fields. So we got to clean them up and create new fields with the new data. And now that we have the new fields in the new dataset component, we can now take a string grid and once again bind it visually with the tickers data. We can now go ahead and create columns in our string grid based on the fields that we have in our mem table. On hitting execute, once again, we can see the data is populated. However, there's one problem. The data that we see belongs to one single ticker that we'd use in our REST debugger. What we really need to do is make this data dynamic based on what the user had selected. So we'll go ahead and use the cell click property of the string grid to then dynamically change our API to call the right information from the selected exchange. The value that we want is actually stored in the MTB exchanges MIC field. So let's go ahead and add that. As expected, our exchanges load up on form load, and when we click one of the exchanges, we can see the tickers data load up in the grid below that. So let's go one step forward and now get prices for the selected stock by the user. For that, what we need to do is go towards the historical data of the ticker that has been selected by the user. API layer calls this the EOD or end of day prices. Again, we give access key and we give the symbol for which we require the end of day prices. The API has succeeded, and now we can see the details of the end of day prices in the data element. And once again, we can copy the components from the REST debugger, paste them on the form. They will be pre-configured. We can go ahead, rename the components. Let's again use the REST response dataset adapter and another mem table, configure them to work with our prices REST response and put the data into the new mem table. Let's go ahead, put the string grid component once again. Okay, so I can see that I may have misconfigured something while copying the components. So let me just go ahead and delete the components and repaste them. So I'll go ahead and delete the old fields from the mem table, and then I'll configure the response dataset adapter to work with the response JSON so that I can get the data of fields into the mem table. I can now go ahead and add the columns to the grid. And once again, I can go ahead and resize the columns so that I can see the data properly. Now, the only thing that's remaining to be done is get the prices as per the ticker that has been selected by the user. And this time I'll take the EOD URL and replace the symbol with what has been selected by the user. Finally, I'll go ahead and execute the EOD prices request. Let's run the application. And as expected, on form load, we are getting the exchanges. On exchange click, we are getting the tickers. And on tickers click, now we are getting the EOD prices. You can see that data has more than prices, like volumes of trades and other relevant stuff. The great thing is that you can actually extend this application further on to show different kinds of charts, write your own customized algorithms, and other such things if you're interested. I hope today's session was interesting enough. See you next time.